President Donald Trump ordered a sudden jump in steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%. Within days, Canada was hit with a 35% export tariff. What was meant as pressure turned into panic. Ottawa reacted instantly. Prime Minister Mark Carney rerouted Canadian steel away from the US and toward Europe and Asia. At the same time, Canada poured massive money into clean tech at home. Detroit, meanwhile, stalled. This was no longer about metal. It was about power. Inside the US, the impact was immediate. Nucor raised steel prices to $900 per ton almost overnight. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis were caught off guard. Each F-150 alone needs nearly a full ton of steel, and Canada had been supplying up to 12 million tons a year. That supply chain snapped. Rail shipments stopped. Orders dried up. Ford's River Rouge plant slowed stamping lines. Traders began whispering a new phrase on Wall Street: Trump's metal recession. The S&P 500 dipped. Detroit froze. Across the border in Windsor, fear spread fast. Fourth-generation Ford worker Kristen Lawton said her whole family worked in auto manufacturing, and suddenly, everything felt unstable. Michigan's unemployment jumped to the highest level in the country. At the same time, Canada ramped up steel production at full speed. Hamilton's steel mills surged as Ottawa shifted from supplier to gatekeeper. And while Detroit struggled to adapt, Canada prepared its next move. Because this disruption wasn't random, it was calculated. And what happened next would change the balance even further. Trump's tariff was a show of force. Carney's response was strategy. Within 48 hours, Canada launched a billion-dollar plan to rebuild its steel industry using electric arc and hydrogen-powered furnaces. Coal was pushed out. Clean energy moved in. This was not just environmental policy. It was a trade weapon. On July 16th, Canada imposed tight quotas on steel from non-FTA countries and slapped a 25% duty on Chinese-origin metal. The message was blunt. Canada would no longer absorb the world's excess steel. Carney promised Canadian steel would stay in Canada for infrastructure, housing, pipelines, and transit. Public money would now fuel domestic jobs. Powered by hydro and nuclear energy, Canadian steel suddenly gained a new advantage: low emissions. And that mattered. By 2026, Europe's carbon border rules would punish dirty steel. Canada's steel qualified almost entirely for exemption. European buyers rushed in. Higher prices, faster exports, locked-in contracts. Carney summed it up with a simple line: this is not protectionism, this is positioning. The trade war had just transformed into a clean tech arms race. And while Canada surged ahead, Detroit was already slipping behind. Back in the United States, the damage was no longer theoretical. It was financial. Ford CEO Jim Farley warned Congress that the 50% tariff would cost the company $2.5 billion this year alone. Each F-Series truck now carried steel priced far beyond normal levels. Losses stacked up by the minute. Dealerships felt it first. Truck prices jumped by $1,500 to $2,000 almost overnight. Vehicles built in Mexico surged even higher. Families across America suddenly faced thousands more for the same trucks they bought just months earlier. But the ripple didn't stop with cars. In Texas, oil drillers ran out of pipe as Canadian supply was redirected inward. Enbridge began tearing apart old inventory just to keep projects alive. Smaller contractors were pushed completely out. Congress rushed in. On July 21st, U.S. senators pleaded with Mark Carney to loosen what they called a metal blockade. He refused. Only small, controlled quotas were offered. His message was simple: cooperate or absorb the cost. Canada did not flood the U.S. with retaliation tariffs. Instead, it offered something better to the world, and the world accepted. Europe embraced Canada's cleaner steel. While Detroit wrestled with shortages and rising costs, global demand quietly shifted north. This was no accident. It was alignment. And Canada was steering it. Not long ago, Canada was seen as America's quiet industrial partner. That image is gone. With support from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Mark Carney pushed a new national rule. All federally funded infrastructure must use Canadian steel. Roads, rail, housing, pipelines. The provinces followed fast. Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan locked domestic steel into every major project. From massive pipelines down to the smallest industrial valves, Canadian-made became mandatory. At the same time, export strategy shifted. Steel shipments to the U.S. fell sharply. New trade routes surged toward Europe, Japan, and India. Low-emission certification opened doors that American steel could not yet enter. And legally, Canada stayed inside USMCA limits. On paper. In practice, the gate was closing. Bypass routes formed. Direct contracts with foreign buyers stretched years into the future. By 2027, much of Canada's clean steel output was already spoken for. Even when U.S. prices dipped later that summer, Canada held the leverage. Volume, emissions, positioning. Donald Trump called it protectionism. Mark Carney called it strategy. But while governments shifted power across oceans, workers on both sides of the border were already paying the price. And the human cost was only beginning to surface. Away from boardrooms and government offices, the real impact hit the factory floor. In Windsor, Canada's auto heartland, fear returned. The same fear workers remembered from 2008. Kristen Lawton, a fourth-generation Ford worker, said her plant felt like a powder keg. Almost her entire family depended on auto manufacturing. Now every shift felt uncertain. Manufacturing makes up nearly 1/5 of Windsor's workforce. The tariff shock triggered layoffs, frozen expansions, and stalled supplier contracts almost instantly. Across Canada, over 500,000 jobs were tied directly to U.S. export demand. That demand evaporated. From Hamilton's steel mills to welders in London, Ontario, the slowdown spread fast. Union leaders warned that younger workers, those with the least savings and the least protection, were now the most exposed. Inside the U.S., the story wasn't much better. American plants that depended on Canadian steel faced furloughs. Trump's 35% tariff, built on disputed fentanyl accusations, fractured labor solidarity across the border. Workers who had once shared the same supply chain now found themselves divided by policy. Canada continued pivoting away. Exports to the U.S. dropped sharply as companies chased contracts in Europe and Asia. For towns built entirely on cross-border trade, the sudden shift felt like economic whiplash. Families began questioning everything: careers, mortgages, futures, and all of it traced back to one political decision. But the conflict was never only about jobs. It was about vision. And that brings us to the final question. This trade war was never just about steel. It was about leverage, legitimacy, and long-term power. Donald Trump's tariff blitz was designed to shield American industry, but it also handed Canada a rare opening, one built on cleaner production, export realignment, and geopolitical timing. Mark Carney's strategy left Washington reacting instead of leading. Today, U.S. automakers face two converging threats: rising material shortages and looming carbon penalties in Europe. The once seamless Windsor-Detroit pipeline now crashes into a tariff wall. Meanwhile, Canadian steel moves freely into carbon-compliant ports without penalty. Ottawa didn't answer with noise. It answered with structure. So now the question turns to you. Should the United States double down on protection or pivot toward a cleaner, more competitive model? Can Detroit recover before long-term damage becomes permanent? And do tariffs really protect workers, or do they simply move the pain somewhere else? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments.